Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. It's time for my fantasy favorite one of every single week, and that's going into players that I'd be looking to trade for this week. So I think trading is one of the most fun and most important things to do in fantasy football. There's just obviously a lot of moving parts every single week. There's a lot of really changed valuations of players. I think capitalizing on those and really trying to get ahead of the market, understanding which players are going to sort of elevate themselves down the stretch here is going to be a big benefit here. So we're going to split this up into two halves. So the first half of the players I'm going to go through are going to be players that I've been looking to trade for if you're in a position where you really need to win the next several weeks. So, if you're 4-5 and you're like, all right, I got to go probably 4-1, 3-2 at a minimum to get myself into the playoffs. I'll be going over guys that I think are going to really help you do that. And then I'll also have players, the back half of the video, where I'll be going over players that I've been looking to trade for if you feel really good about your playoff odds and you really want to find a way just to elevate your roster for when you get there. So, hopefully you guys find both of those useful. These players, a lot of them sort of overlap for both of them, but it's just sort of wanted to make a distinction there because obviously we're getting to the point in the season where your roster is in a really different spot than everyone else in your league. You want to make sure that you're making decisions based off of that. Like if you are 4-5, you probably don't want to go trade for Amari and Hampton. It's not going to be a guy that's going to help you get into the playoffs, so then who cares if he's good when you get there, right? So that's just an example. He's not on this list, but just sort of what I'm talking about here. So if you have any specific trade questions, let me know in the comments below. I really do love interacting with you guys there, seeing what trades you guys have. It's often some like inspiration for me. And yeah, hopefully you guys find it useful, and hopefully you guys enjoy. Let's get into it, guys. So the first player I'd be looking to trade for if you're in a spot where you do need to win over the next 4 to 5 weeks, it would be Quinshon Judkins. We haven't gotten any negative reports. I'm recording this Monday night, so it's possible that maybe something comes out later on in the week, but it sounds like we're in a pretty good spot for Judkins to go out there and play this week. And he's got the third easiest strength of schedule for running backs until we reach the fantasy playoffs. The Browns are actually going to win a decent amount of games over the next 5 weeks. Over those 5 weeks, they have games against the Jets, the Raiders, and the Titans. I honestly think they're probably going to go 3-2 this over this 5-game stretch, and Judkins is the kind of player, really like most running backs, but especially a player on a really not great team, not a guy that necessarily profiles as an elite pass catcher. He ends up being incredibly game script dependent, so seeing those 3 games on the schedule really makes me feel good about Judkins being able to go out there and put up some really monster performances. We know he's an elite player, right? We've seen it already. You could tell right away when he took the NFL field this was going to be a guy that's going to make a difference in the NFL for a long time, and I think Judkins can be like a high-end running back too the rest of the way, and he's coming off of a bad game. He got dinged up, just had the bye. It's been a little bit since we got a little bit of production out of him. You got to go back like 3 weeks to his big game against Miami. So I think Judkins is a guy that we really should be targeting right now if you really need to find a way to get yourself into the playoffs. I think Judkins is a big high-quality asset here. I would maybe wait a day or two and make sure we get some positive practice reports. Just it'd be bad to trade for him and see him miss a couple weeks with that shoulder injury, but there's no real indication yet that's going to happen, so I feel good about Judkins as a guy that I do want to get on my roster to make a playoff push here. Next, this one's a big one, but the Viking wide receivers, so both Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. This is actually a set of players that apply regardless of whatever situation you're in. They have an incredible schedule the entire rest of the way. Over the next 5 weeks, you get Baltimore, Chicago, Green Bay, Seattle, and Washington. That's 5 straight fantastic matchups. I know Seattle's been great on defense, but really it's because their run defense is so phenomenal. You have to throw on them. Green Bay, not as elite at defensively as they were to start the season. Baltimore is maybe the toughest matchup in there, to be honest, just because they've been turning things around. But I'm really optimistic about what we're going to get out of this Vikings offense here. J.J. McCarthy just looked good watching him play football this last week, and we know these wide receivers are talented enough to go out there and do a lot. And if you look at these teams, like outside of maybe Washington, all these teams are going to be able to put up points on them. So the Vikings are going to have to score over those 5 weeks, and they're probably going to have to do it through the air. On top of that, in the fantasy playoffs, looks really good too. You get Dallas, New York, and Detroit. So these Viking wide receivers might go nuclear for an 8-game stretch here and be the reason a lot of people win fantasy leagues. And like I said, J.J. McCarthy looked legitimate. I think that Addison is probably going to be the cheapest one of the two, obviously, coming off a bit of a down game. But I think both these guys are going to be really great assets. Neither one has really... Well, Addison's been great since he got back, but he's obviously cheaper as the wide receiver too here. Jefferson hasn't really had those like ceiling performances that we're used to so far this season, so he's probably going to come at a slight discount as well. I think that in general, both these guys can be a legitimate like if you told me that these guys both end up being top 12 wide receivers over the last 8 weeks, I think that's legitimately in the range of outcomes. And I mean, like Jefferson could legitimately be the wide receiver 1 the rest of the way. I know it's tough just because you didn't see the yardage totals with McCarthy here, but we know that's in his range of outcomes. The schedule is really going to lend itself to that. I want to do just about everything I can to try and get Jefferson on my rosters right now, and same thing with Addison. So at quarterback, if you want a bit of a cheaper option, a guy that I think is going to be really good for us over the next 4 weeks, it's actually Jackson Dart. He's got the easiest schedule for a quarterback the entire rest of the regular season. Does have that Week 14 bye, so keep that in mind if you're trading for him. You're just going to have to find somebody in Week 14. But honestly, Jackson Dart's going to be effectively free. There's a chance he's still sitting on waivers in some of your leagues, and everything's just lined up for him here. The defense is horrendous. They're playing from behind every single game. He's playing really well. I know he doesn't have a whole lot of pass catchers, but he's making it work with Slayton and Wandale and Theo Johnson, and he's running the ball a ton as well. So you're getting a ton of production here. I think there's a legitimate chance that Dart ends up being a top 10, maybe even a top 5 quarterback the rest of the regular season for us in fantasy. And again, he's not going to cost you really anything. I think Dart is a legitimate lineup lock, at least the rest of the fantasy regular season. He's got some tougher matchups as we get into the playoffs, but Dart, I think, can get you there. And just with his rushing upside, honestly, he's pretty safe on a weekly basis, and it gives you so much upside on a weekly basis that Dart is a guy I want to have in my roster. And for those of us that have been streaming quarterback all season long, I think Jackson Dart can really be a fix to that problem. So anyone with Dart isn't necessarily tied to him because he wasn't drafted right. If you have Dart, you probably have 2 quarterbacks. I'm seeing a lot of teams like Bo Nix and Jackson Dart, stuff like that. Those teams are going to be willing to move him for a flex caliber asset. I think Dart can be a legitimate difference maker, so I would go look to get him if you need to squeak your way into the playoffs and you don't have a quarterback. And the best running back in my mind to trade for if you're going to look to try and just make a push here over the next 5 weeks is actually Jaylen Warren. So he enters a 6-week stretch. This includes Week 15 because honestly, if you're in a spot where you're 4-5, even if you win out, you're probably not getting that bye in the fantasy playoffs at this point. So Week 15 becomes really important in its own regard. You get the Chargers, Cincinnati, we love that. Chicago, love that too. Buffalo, Baltimore, and Miami. So a six straight positive matchups here for Jaylen Warren on the ground. I think there's a real shot here for Warren to go out there and be a top 10 back the rest of the season. They're not using Gainwell or Caleb Johnson really all that much at all. I know Gainwell gets a little bit of passing work. Caleb Johnson is just not a part of the game plan on a weekly basis. Warren is effectively a workhorse running back for what looks to be a relatively good team. They looked a lot better on defense this last week as well. Typically, there's a pretty strong correlation between teams with elite defenses and high-end run games just because that's sort of the style of football you want to play, right? You want to lean on the run game, play defense, create turnovers, get short fields. We saw it last week, got a lot of turnovers. Warren got 2 short yardage touchdowns. That could happen a lot of the rest of the way here. I think, especially in some of these matchups, like against Cincinnati, Warren could go out there and be the running back 1. Against Miami, he could go out there and be the running back 1. There are going to be some real blow-up performances for Warren the rest of the season, and I think you're basically paying a running back 2 price tag for him. Some people will be savvy. They'll really be aware of the schedule here, but it's not like he's been dominant over the last couple of weeks. I think Warren's a guy that he's still undervalued at what he's going to do for you the rest of the way, so I do want to go try and get him in any league that I can right now. So moving on to this next set of players, these are guys that I'd be looking to trade for. If you feel really good about your playoff odds, these are guys that I think are going to be more dominant during the fantasy playoffs than anything else. It's not to say they're not going to be useful over the next 5 weeks, but they're guys that I really think are going to peak once we reach the playoffs here. The first guy is going to be De'Von Achane. He's obviously been fantastic. Has been just so reliable, such a high floor with the PPR usage, scoring plenty. He's clearly a really talented player, and he's so important to this offense that we get a really safe floor on a weekly basis. But I think we're going to have some real explosive games once we get into the playoffs. If we've learned anything so far this season, it's to target teams to get to play either Cincinnati or Dallas. He gets the Cincinnati matchup in Week 16, so De'Von Achane, especially if you're locked in, that Pittsburgh matchup, not bad either. It's actually pretty good, but assuming you're going to be a team that you feel really good about even having a bye, you're going to get the bye, and you're probably just going to make the fantasy championship because Achane's probably dropping 200 yards and 2 touchdowns against Cincinnati. I think Tampa Bay in the championship game, another game that could easily be a shootout. De'Von Achane more than capable. Tampa Bay hasn't actually been all that good against the opposing running backs so far this season. So I think there's a real shot for Achane to go out there and be a top 3 running back during the fantasy football playoffs. And I really love that. I think people in general are a little bit scared of Achane. There's a lot of turmoil in Miami. Obviously, things have not gone the way they'd want them to this season. I'm not all that worried about it, though. They fired the GM. I think that stabilizes things a little bit, actually, because we know they're probably not going to fire Mike Macdonald mid-season, and I'd also be shocked if they moved off of Tua mid-season. Benching Tua for Zach Wilson or Quinn Ewers just doesn't make any sense. There's no future with either one of those guys. So we're going to still have Achane with McDaniel and Tua. There's nothing that's going to change from an offensive standpoint here, and with the way they're using him, Achane's got legitimate top 3 running back usage. Again, I think people are a little bit worried. You might not have to pay quite that much for him, and he's a guy that I'd be super stoked to have on my roster the rest of the way here, especially in the fantasy playoffs. If you want a bit of a cheaper guy to buy, I think that Aaron Jones is actually a decent buy for those of you who are really hurting at running back 2. Maybe you went hero running back with like Christian McCaffrey, your wide receivers are stacked, and you just don't have a running back 2. I've seen a lot of teams like that actually across some of my leagues, and I think Aaron Jones is going to be a guy that could be a legitimate contributor for us once we reach the fantasy playoffs. And the primary reason is that playoff schedule here. We get Dallas in week 15. Everybody can score on Dallas. Dallas and Cincinnati every single week. Those are teams that are just going to give up 40 points, and you feel really great about that. You get the Giants in week 16. That's not a good defense either. We're going to see plenty of production. We just saw McCaffrey and Brian Robinson put up big games against the Giants, so that's certainly a great schedule. And then Detroit. Detroit in the championship game, that's the sketchier one, but we just saw Aaron Jones look fantastic against them. He's the guy that's going to be better against Detroit than Jordan Mason because he's more explosive. He can get to the edge. Detroit's got that really great interior defensive line, but they can beat around the edge a little bit. So Aaron Jones is a guy that should be much more valuable against Detroit than what Jordan Mason would be. So I think Aaron Jones can be a legitimate running back 2 for us in the fantasy playoffs, and nobody has been relying on him by any means, right? There was plenty of leagues he was dropped in while he was hurt, but he's looked legitimately good. Does have the shoulder injury right now. It sounds like it's nothing serious. Sounds like it's something he can take a shot and just play through, but even if he has to miss a week or 2, we're talking about getting Aaron Jones for the fantasy playoffs in this case. He should be good to go 5 weeks from now, right? So I feel good about Aaron Jones. You're not going to pay very much for him at all, but I do think he'll be a really useful asset for us once we get to the playoffs there. Next, we got Jalen Waddle. If you're sensing a theme here, I'm pretty optimistic about what the Miami Dolphins are going to do in the fantasy playoffs here. It's just a fantastic schedule. You get Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. We're going to be targeting Cincinnati the entire rest of the season, and Tampa Bay. So those 3 teams, all 3 of them can score. None of those 3, except for maybe Pittsburgh, really have good defenses. And I think we're going to find ourselves in a lot of shootouts over the course of those 3 weeks. We saw that Waddle, a popular trade target, or, his name came up a lot during the trade deadline here. Wasn't moved, so we know we've got stability with Waddle there. He's going to be remain there as the only real talented pass catcher on the offense, unless you want to count Achane in that. But I really want guys like Waddle on my roster. He's incredibly talented. He's on a good-ish offense. I know they've looked bad at times this season. You've got a horrendous defense, and you've got no target competition. So you're looking at an explosive player on a team that's going to be playing catch-up pretty much every game the rest of the season. They're going to have to put up 30 if they want to win games, and if you told me that Jalen Waddle goes out there and puts up top 5 numbers for 3 weeks during the fantasy playoffs, like with those 3 matchups, I totally get it. I think Waddle could easily be a guy that goes out there and has a nuclear performance in week 16. Like Waddle and Achane could both be the reason that teams make the fantasy championships this season, and just those kinds of matchups with this talent, these are guys that I want to get on my roster, and they're guys that I think are going to be really great for us in the playoffs. So I really like Waddle. I think he's a high-end wide receiver 2, low-end wide receiver 1 the rest of the season, and I still don't think you're going to have to pay quite that much to get him on your roster right now. And the last player I'll touch on here is going to be the only tight end on the list, and it's going to be Tyler Warren. Probably not going to be super cheap, but he's coming off of a bit of a down game, only 5 catches for 26 yards this last week. So it's his worst game of the year, right? So if you want to consider to buy low opportunity, at least it's there. And what we love about it is a 3rd best strength of schedule for a tight end during the fantasy playoffs. Has matchups for Seattle, San Francisco, and Jacksonville. All 3 of those are plus matchups. All 3 of those teams can score as well, so you're going to see a situation. It's not like the Colts are just going to get up 30 and lean on the run game the entire rest of the game against really, in theory, either one of those teams. It could maybe happen with Jacksonville or San Francisco, but Seattle looks legit. Again, I know Seattle's defenses look phenomenal, but they actually can get beat by the tight ends over the middle. Generally, you can throw on Seattle a lot better than you can run on them, so we like that there. He's just very clearly a top 5 tight end the rest of the season. Got to remember, he's a rookie too, so we should be expecting this guy to get better and better over the entire course of the year. Could easily produce some spike weeks for us in the playoffs, and I don't think you're really going to get a better buy window for him just because of how involved he's been, how just incredibly talented he is. Like, you're not going to see very many super low output games for Warren. So like 5 for 26 is about as bad as it's going to get for him. I feel great about him the rest of the season. He's a guy that I want on my roster and a guy that I think can make a difference for us if we get into the playoffs. So I do want him for sure. So that'll do it for the players that I'd be looking to trade for ahead of Week 10 here. Up next, I'll go over some guys that I'd be looking to maybe trade away, guys with really bad upcoming schedules, guys that I don't think are necessarily going to help us depending upon what we're looking at for the rest of the season here. So stay tuned for that video. That video should also come out the same day as this one, so I highly recommend you guys watch both of those videos and then go out there and wheel and deal with that information. So appreciate you guys. If you have any specific trade questions, let me know in the comments below. I really do love interacting with you guys there. If you made it this far in the video, give it a thumbs up. It helps me out quite a bit. And if you want to make sure you get access to all the future videos, just make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way you don't miss anything that's coming out here. Do 5 videos every single week. We'll be here all year long and get some championships together. So appreciate you guys. I'll catch you guys with the next one. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If
If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.